Number 55 in the critical Friday before Easter here, which is a long cultural event, and we have acquired some foodstuffs, but I have sort of created, I think, last year a new family tradition of no stress holidays. So we're taking it easy, and it's basically cooking what we want and eating what we want whenever as we go along this Easter without making a big, you know, mission to Mars campaign out of the whole thing, which I think I'm done with just ever. Well, we are here. I am here for chapters 4 and 5 of Anyone Got a Match by Max Schulman. And it's both chapters because they're relatively short, to which we now proceed. Chapter 4. Jefferson came out of his trance only a few seconds after Virgil did. His eyes swept the room seeking his son. He found Virgil looking directly at him. The old man tilted his head toward the door of the lodge, indicating he wanted to see Virgil outside. Virgil nodded acknowledgement. "Excuse me, honey," he said to Boo. He kissed her again, loud and hard, and rose and joined his father in the clear air outdoors. They did not speak. They sat down side by side on a big tree stump. They sat easily, calmly, like two riverboat gamblers, each holding four of a kind. "Boy," said Jefferson casually, "I got hold of an idea." "About a black hat?" asked Virgil, just as casually. Jefferson shot him a respectful look. "You ahead of me, boy?" "Not ahead, Pa, just with you. You're thinking food could be the black hat." "Well, why not? It's all poison, ain't it?" "Well, it can be." "Damn right it can. You heard what my chemist said about all them scientists who claim our food is poison. But people don't seem to get worked up about it, and I'll tell you why. Because food ain't like cigarettes. I mean, food's got a good name. I mean, you never heard of nobody sneaking behind the barn and to have their first slice of bread, did you? So you think you could give food a bad name? I know I can. I'll show that so-called Surgeon General a thing or two about scaring people. I'm going to blast food. I'm going to rip it to pieces. I'm going to do such a smear job on food that this country will end up thinking the safest thing you can put in your mouth is a cigarette. But to make this anti-food crusade convincing, said Virgil, you'll need some scientific backing, which is where I come in. Say, you are with me, said Jefferson admiringly. Right on top of you, Pa. I see it all now. You want me to take the chemistry department at Acanthus College and put them to work finding the poisons in food. Right. And then you'll get your high-pressure publicity boys to spread the word all over the country. On the television. That's where I'll put it. Dab smack on the television where even the idiots who can't read will get the message. Great. Yeah, and people will get so nervous they won't just start smoking again. They'll start chain smoking. Brilliant idea, Pa. Too bad. The elation oozed out of Jefferson's face. Why not? 2 reasons. First, no network would carry such a program unless they had someone from the food industry to present their side of the argument. After all, the networks sell a hell of a lot more time to food companies than to cigarette makers. Boy, don't you think I know that? Sure, they'll have somebody on the program to take the defensive, and that suits me just perfect. I'd like somebody else on the defensive for a change. Me, I want to attack, because that's what folks believe, the attack, not the defense. Probably true, agreed Virgil, but that doesn't begin to answer my second objection. You'll need scientific research to back up the charges you intend to make against food. Where's this research coming from? Why, you said it yourself, boy. Acanthus College. And that's why you're stone cold dead, said Virgil. Acanthus College is without doubt the rectum of the academic world. Who is going to believe any scientific report coming out of a school with the lowest admission standards, the poorest scholarship level, the highest teacher incompetence, the oldest equipment, the smallest library, the thinnest curriculum, and the fewest textbooks in the United States of America? That bad, huh? Said Jefferson morosely. Well, Harvard it's not. Hey, cried Jefferson, brightening, that's it. If them reports come out of Harvard, people will believe them. So why don't I give Harvard the money and start them working? You can give Harvard money, Pa, but you can't tell them how to use it. Oh, said Jefferson. Yale? Virgil shook his head. No, Pa, nor Princeton, nor MIT, nor Caltech. There's only one place you can run the show, and that's at Acanthus. And how are you going to get a legitimate scientist to come to Acanthus? Boy, listen to me. I swear I ain't looking to pull a swindle. I don't want to disadvantage potatoes or beans or anything else. All I want is honest facts from honest men. Ain't there no possible way we can get some of them down to Acanthus? This was the question Virgil had been waiting for. This was the trap he was itching to spring. Well, there might be, Pa, he said, managing to keep the eagerness out of his voice. His face, however, betrayed him. The old man's sharp eyes narrowed suspiciously. I don't like the look of you, boy, he said. Virgil put on his most innocent stare. Oh, what's wrong? I don't know, said Jefferson, but maybe you better give me a kiss because I think you're about to screw me. Virgil abandoned deception. All right, Pa, I do have a plot in mind, but it's for your good as well as mine. Let's hear. I can get you the chemists and nutritionists you want if you'll do one simple thing. You must turn Acanthus into a decent, respectable, bona fide college. And how do I do that? Well, first, we've got to raise our college board scores to the Ivy League level. Okay, I'll do it. I don't know what the hell it means, but I'll do it. Second, you have to clean out those fossils on the faculty and bring in a bunch of new men, big names. This means raiding Harvard, Stanford, Chicago, places like that. You're saying I got to offer them more money. Okay, money I've got. What's next? Wait a minute, I'm not through talking about the faculty. It takes more than a few chemists to make a top college. You need to go after the best men in the humanities, too. What's that? Never mind, you got it. Go ahead. Also the best men in the arts, the social sciences, the languages, the classics, and so forth. Fine, proceed. I want a library that will compare with Widener. I'll buy you Widener. Next, desegregation. Jefferson frowned. Don't push your luck, boy. This is important, Pa. Most of the teachers we want have strong convictions on the subject. We'll need real desegregation, not the way you did it in Owens Mill, 9 Negroes in the high school and 12 in the grammar school. All right, how many do you want in Acanthus? Virgil took a deep breath. 500, he said. Jefferson was silent for a long moment. Then he said calmly, Boy, I suppose you thought I'd yell and holler and carry on. Yes, sir, said Virgil truthfully. I'm surprised. Don't you know your old Pa? Are you forgetting I was the first man in the cigarette business to put black foremen in charge of white workers? Are you forgetting I desegregated all the buses, hotels, restaurants, and movie shows in Owens Mill without anybody ever asking me to? That's true. And wasn't it just last month I got a plaque for social tolerance from them Hebes at B'nai B'rith? Yes, sir. And ain't it practically a dead certain cinch that the William Lloyd Garrison Foundation, which is the oldest and most respected race relations outfit in the country, is going to give their annual Community Relations Award to Owens Mill this year? Yes, Pa, said Virgil. Then can I have 500 Negroes at Acanthus? You can have 50. All right, said Virgil promptly. Jefferson gave him a puzzled look. Aren't you going to argue? No, sir. I was figuring I'd get 25, replied Virgil. Damn, said the old man sadly. To think of wasting a mind like yours in a college. Well, go on. What's next? Virgil swallowed. You won't like this. I ain't liked the goddamn thing so far. Let's have it. Virgil swallowed again. No more football. Jefferson blinked. You know, boy, for a minute there I thought you said no more football. No more football, Virgil repeated, mustering strength. No more 19 Myers. As long as that big-necked baboon is around, Acanthus is going to be a joke. No self-respecting teacher, or student for that matter, will come near the place. So make up your mind, Pa. You can have either a football team or a black hat. Jefferson smiled mirthlessly. You've been waiting a long time for this moment, ain't you, Virgil? I won't lie to you, Pa. Yes, but I'm telling you a plain fact. It's 19 or the black hat. One. Don't leave me no choice, does it? I'm sorry, Pa. Like hell you are. Like hell I am, Virgil agreed. Okay, said Jefferson. What else? That's it. Well, said Jefferson. Well, said Virgil. Done, said Jefferson. Done, said Virgil, and shook his father's hand. Chapter 5. Polyshapian hung up the telephone and turns to her sons, Ezra and Leo, who stood on the flagstone patio of the Bel Air house, each holding a surfboard. The boys were naked except for skin-tight, iridescent latex swim trunks. Their bodies, mantled with rippling muscles, shone like burnished copper. The tips of their dark hair had been sun-washed to the color of maize. Their black eyes, fixed on Polly, were motionless with hope held in abeyance. Twin frowns creased their tiny brows. "Your father says he can't take you to Long Beach," Polly reported. They sighed and continued to stare at Polly, their eyes now quite empty of hope. Polly looked at their sweet, silent, dumb, disappointed faces and felt the usual rush of guilt. "See here," she said defensively, "your father is a busy man. He's running a network, remember?" "We know, Ma," said Ezra without rancor. "It's okay," said Leo in the same tone. Polly's guilt mounted. "And you know you can't have my car," she continued. "I have a million things to do today." "It's okay, Ma," said Leo. "Sure," said Ezra. Their gaze was steady, obedient, and stricken, like two well-trained hounds who have been told they cannot come to the hunt. "I'll take my car," cried Polly, utterly routed. "I'll get a cab or something. Take my car. Take it. Take it." Big white smiles lighted the twins' faces. "You're a great American," said Ezra. "You're 100%, said Leo. They leaned over to kiss her, but she pulled away irritably. "Get going," she snapped, "and try very hard not to drop my car in the ocean, will you? And when you come home, if you come home, I want you to clean your room, understand?" "Yes, Ma," they said, and ran ecstatically from the patio. Polly looked after their great, tawny, disappearing bodies, lit a cigarette, and proceeded to do some thinking. She did her thinking as she did everything else, con brio. She was a small, swift, graceful woman, never at rest. Her hands were dexterous and eloquent. Her legs, not long, were rounded, shapely, and utile, light when she danced, certain when she walked, strong and thrusting when she made love. Her hair was russet, healthy, glistening. Her skin was dark, not swarthy like Ira's, but black Celtic with an underlay of high color. Her face, mobile mouth, short nose, unterrified chin, clear brow, flashing blue eyes could range from Gioconda serenity, rare, to sparks showing outrage, frequent. Expression chased expression across her face as she smoked and paced and thought. Why had she given the twins her car? A clap in the chops is what they deserved after dropping their Austin Healey in the drink last week. And after bringing home those sickening report cards the previous semester, and after all the other numberless, endless, reasonless displays of stupidity. Yet instead of 40 lashes or even a thorough chewing out, she had given them her car. Why? A possible explanation occurred to her. She was remembering a lecture on child psychology she had heard some weeks ago at UCLA. What with Ira seldom getting home from the office before 10 p.m., Polly had to choose between night courses at UCLA or taking a lover. The second had, upon consideration, seemed less entertaining. The lecture, Polly recalled, had been delivered by a youngish man with tweeds, thick glasses, thin hair, and a pitying manner toward anyone who questioned his propositions. When children go wrong, he had said in a way that brooked no rebuttal, always blame the parents. Misbehavior in children is nothing more than unconscious wish fulfillment in parents. Parents, on an unconscious level, of course, seduce children into acting out their own suppressed desires. Well, maybe so, thought Polly. Maybe she and Ira, who had both endured hard, poor childhoods, had unconsciously pushed the twins into becoming idlers and beach bums. There was surely evidence to support such a hypothesis. Polly and Ira had both grown up on the New York pavements, had both wanted their children to have it easier than they did, and when Ira's fortunes improved, had both been proud to see their kids enjoying the same advantages as the neighbors' kids, the neighbors in this case being Gregory Peck, Bing Crosby, and Aristotle Onassis. But no, thought Polly. Parental wish fulfillment, if ever it were a factor, had stopped early. As soon as Polly had realized the twins were turning into a set of sun-baked slobs, she had tried with all her considerable resources to reverse the tide. And in fairness, she had to admit that Ira had done his sporadic best, too. Polly had supplied an intelligent amalgam of love and discipline. Ira had contributed Levantine outbursts and mouth-to-mouth kisses. Nothing helped. The twins greeted all assaults with the same open, level-eyed, unastonished agreeableness. If they were asked for an apology, they would apologize. If they were required to swear to reform, they would so swear. If they were punished, they would make no protest. Slobs they remained, good-natured slobs to be sure, but slobs. With a quick wave of her hand, Polly dismissed parental wish fulfillment. She had a simpler answer, the same answer that accounted not only for the twins' slobbery, but for Ira's misery and Polly's mopery. Television. Everything had been fine in the Shapian family until television intruded its big, ugly eye. The boys had been averagely bright. Polly and Ira had enjoyed a felicitous union. Of course, they had had occasional spats, make that fights and change occasional to regular, but the fights had been good, healthy, air-clearing fights about important topics like Henry Wallace or fruit symbolism in the cherry orchard. The Shapians had been very serious thinkers back in the early years of their marriage. In fact, they had been cerebrators of consequence even before. They first met in 1940. Ira was 19 years old, and Polly, then Miss Polly McLeod, was 16, and the world needed saving. To this worthy end, they pledged their youth and their burning passions. They joined the group theater. Of course, they were not full-fledged members of the group. They did not figure importantly in major productions or exchange opinions with giants like Odets, Luhrmann, Strasberg, and Cheryl Crawford. Polly and Ira served a more lowly, more peripheral function. They painted scenery, rigged lights, rehearsed classroom scenes, did improvisations in mime, worked as grips, prompters, ushers, and occasionally walk-ons. But they were not kept forever on the edges. When the group held general meetings, Polly and Ira were privileged to attend and to listen, fascinated as the giants held forth on topics like Stanislavski, Ibsen, Adam Smith, Prester John, the Missouri Compromise, and Newton's Third Law, all of which in the minds of the giants and in the minds of Polly and Ira too were clearly interrelated. And in addition to their long stimulating days at the group, Polly and Ira were frequently detailed to go out and distribute leaflets or march with pickets or hiss at rallies of the German-American Bund. Perhaps the most gratifying of all were the post-midnight sessions at Riker's cafeteria. Here the hot-eyed groupniks would gather by the dozen and sit the whole night through discussing life, art, politics, science, metaphysics, beauty, and truth, their fervor unflagging, their cigarettes burning so low that a toothpick was needed to hold the butt, their single cups of coffee developing a cold, viscous scum. These were busy, challenging days for Polly and Ira, but nonetheless, love crept in. One spring day in 1941, about 6 months after they had met, Ira turned to Polly as they were marching with a striking cloakmakers local and said, "Listen, I think I love you." "Me too," said Polly. "All right," said Ira briskly. "We'll activate our impulses when we get time. Right now there's work to do, right?" "Right," said Polly. They exchanged a fast handshake and resumed chanting, "Down with the bosses." The activation of their impulses was not quickly accomplished. As soon as the cloakmakers' strike ended, won by the bosses, Ira got his first chance to direct. It was only a small classroom exercise, a scene from Othello, but it was Ira's maiden effort, and he shook like an aspen. His trembling accelerated when he learned which 3 actors had been assigned to him for the scene. There was Polly, there was a man named Eric Lindstrom from Minnesota, and there was a man named Linus Calloway from Georgia. He loved Polly and had a lover's normal nervousness about directing his beloved, but she was the least of his problems. She would, of course, play Desdemona. But casting the other 2 parts, Othello and Iago, gave Ira fits of anguished vacillation. The dilemma was that Lindstrom was a thin, pale, frail, blonde Swede, where Linus Calloway was a big, deep-chested, woolly-cropped Negro. How could Ira, a certified left liberal equalitarian, cast a Negro as Othello? Wasn't it a bit de trop? Wasn't it too obviously white massa? And yet, what kind of theatrical sense did it make to blacken pallid piping Lindstrom and whiten booming black Linus? How would the giants of the group feel if they saw such a gaffe? But on the other hand, how would they feel if they saw Ira exploiting, that was the word, exploiting, a Negro? Ira agonized and came to a decision. Civil liberties superseded art. "Linus," he said as rehearsal drew near, "I've been thinking. I know what you've been thinking, Linus interrupted with a smile. He was a handsome man, imposing, bass-voiced, easy in his bearing, quick smile. I know exactly what you've been thinking, he said. Forget it. But, Ira, said Linus gently, you're directing a scene from Shakespeare, not organizing a lynch mob. Do it right. That means me as Othello and Lindstrom as Iago. I can't, cried Ira. Why not? We're thinking of having Othello enter eating a watermelon? Do it right, Ira. They'll all be watching. This could mean something to you. Do you think, asked Ira hotly, that I would advance my career at the cost of exploiting a fellow human being? Tell you what, said Linus, send $1 to the NAACP, but do this scene the way it needs to be done. Now can I please go tell Lindstrom he doesn't have to play the Moor because he's out in the wings peeing in his pants? Linus laughed then, a big, booming, infectious laugh, and he held Ira in a bear hug until Ira was laughing too. The scene was performed with Linus as Othello, and later some restrained but definitely flattering words were murmured to Ira by the paladins of the group, and Ira took Polly and Linus to Rikers to celebrate. So festive was Ira that he ordered pound cake with the coffee. To you, Linus, said Ira, raising his cake like a goblet of champagne, you did me one hell of a favor. That I did, admitted Linus, without immodesty, and I'll tell you why, because you're a bleeder, and that's good. You never send to find for when whom the bell tolls. Nor you either, Polly, he added, turning to her. Thank you, she said. Then she said earnestly, I appreciate what you did for Ira. I think you're a fine, decent person, and I'm proud to be your friend. Not so fast, cautioned Linus. We're not friends yet, good Caucasian lady. I'd like to be your friend, yours too, Ira, but there's a question that has to be answered first. I mean, answered by me, not you. Trouble is, neither of you will ever be able to ask it. What's that? Said Ira. You want to know what it feels like to be black, replied Linus. Well, said Ira and Polly, exchanging a guilty glance. Let me try to tell you, Linus continued. It's bad, mostly. It's a kick in the belly, mostly. But there's a part of it that's awful good. It's like when you were a kid and you had a secret nobody else had. Maybe the secret was measles, but it was yours. Do you understand? Yes, said Polly. No, you don't, said Linus. You don't understand at all. But try to understand this. I don't need or want or appreciate pity. If you feel like putting your little pink hand in my big black one, well, I'd like that. But don't pull away, sweet child. Once you put it there, you must go where I go, and it could just possibly be to the barricades. Polly held out her hand without pause or reservation. Linus hesitated a brief moment, then took it. Ira reached over and closed his hand on both of theirs. Kind of misty, ain't it? Asked Linus. Then he threw back his head and laughed deeply. Yes, I do like you pale faces, he said. Let's hope none of us ever has to stand up and be counted. I know which side I'll be on, declared Ira. And I, added Polly stoutly. I believe you, said Linus truthfully, but let's hope the day never comes. Let's all hope real hard, because I don't want to be there either. From then on, Polly and Ira went nightly to Rikers with Linus. He was a good talker, wry, funny, and authentically erudite, B.A. at Fisk, M.A. and Ph.D. Columbia. In fact, he was in the group not because he was stage-struck. In fact, he thought show business was largely ridiculous, but because he was investigating the theater as an instrument of propaganda. The betterment of race relations was the goal and fixation of Linus' life, and he proposed to explore every possible means. Pearl Harbor put an end to the seminars at Rikers. Linus went immediately to enlist. He tried first to join as a line soldier, but when he learned he would have to serve in a segregated outfit, he signed on instead as a mess boy in the Navy. If Uncle Sam says I'm second class, well, goddammit, I'll be second class, he explained to Polly and Ira, laughing loudly but without mirth. Ira, too, rushed to his nearest recruiting office, for he yearned mightily to do battle with the forces of reaction. Polly, he said after he had filled out his Air Force enlistment papers, I think maybe we should get married right now. Who knows, he added with a kind of twisty Ronald Colman smile, if I'll be coming back. Oh, my darling, cried Polly, clutching him. Polly's father's consent was reluctantly given. Her father, a member of the New York City Police Department, disapproved thoroughly of Ira. As a matter of fact, Polly gave him kind of a pain too. But as a veteran of the fighting 69th, he could hardly say no to a young man on his way to fight the Hun. There were very few Huns and no Japs at all where Ira was stationed after his induction. He was sent south to an Air Force base in the town of Owens Mill. Polly joined him there, which might have been pretty dismal for a girl born and bred in New York, except that she found 3 powerful antidotes to boredom. First, she had Ira, who was then a fiery young buck. Second, she made friends with 2 attractive people, a young woman named Barbara Ogilvy Owens and a young man named Virgil Tatum. And third, she got pregnant, which women love to do. Not trusting the local doctor, who doubled as a veterinarian, to preside over her confinement, Polly went back to New York to give birth to Ezra and Leo. By then, the war was in its final months, so she never returns to Owens Mill. Instead, she rented a flat on McDougal Street and waited for Ira to be demobilized. Ira sought work as a director when he returned to New York in early 1946. Being the avant-gardist he was, he encountered a knotty problem. Off-Broadway had not yet started, so he was forced to stage off-Broadway type plays on Broadway. He enjoyed a succession of resounding flops, and each night he came home screaming like a wounded thing. Polly screamed right back, but only because Ira required it. She knew that in his heart he was not unhappy, for his reach was exceeding his grasp. The fluke invitation to join NBM was as disastrous for Polly as for Ira. They sat in Hollywood for 6 months and screened for real. Then Ira went into television, and the bluebird of happiness came flying back. Ira, as a director, had the guts of a steeplejack. He would try anything: Sophocles, Robinson Jeffers, Cardinal Newman, documentaries on whores and junkies, and television, still too young to know fear. Let him. But Ira's halcyon days, and therefore Polly's, were numbered. He had been marked as a man who could nice, and his seduction was accomplished in short order. Polly was honest. Her seduction, she admitted, was accomplished at the same time. While the paunchy, plausible executives bamboozled Ira, their smooth, lacquered wives worked on Polly. First, they disarmed her by telling her they were smooth and lacquered, and they hated it. Then they extended invitations to her, not invitations to canasta or long lunches at Scandia, but invitations to serve on committees for the symphony and the hospital and the fair treatment of Mexicans by the Los Angeles police force. They did their work well, and Polly was properly snowed. Not for very long, of course, but long enough to take her eye off Ezra and Leo while they slipped irretrievably into the soft, shiftless life of the California rich. Yes, thought Polly, pacing her flagstone patio in Bel Air, it was television that did it. No need to get fancy about parental wish fulfillment. It was just plain old television that turned her kids into oafs, her husband into a sponge, and herself into a hatchet. For years, she had wanted out, desperately wanted out. But how? Ira was mired, and all her piety and wit would not budge him. She dialed a yellow cab to take her on her errands. God is love, there is no death, she repeated rapidly to herself as she spun the dial. Look at the bright side. Things could be worse. The twins could have become juvenile delinquents instead of lovable dunces. Ira could have gone into daring daylight robberies instead of television. And herself? Polly paused. What worse could have happened to her? She concentrated fiercely, but nothing came to mind. See you next week.